Hey, I want to take some time today to do a little impromptu video here. Now, I know that in times of stress, in times of chaos and violence, we all try to impose some sort of rationale on it. We try to figure out what is the reason for all of this. And it seems that while we're trying to do that to all these random acts of mass murder, we tend to be doing one thing that I think we need to stop, and that is demonizing mental illness. Now, I hate to say it to people out there. I know this is not going to be a popular opinion, and it's probably going to make some people angry. But mental illness is not our issue. Now, I'm not saying we don't have a mental health crisis in this country, because we do. We do have a mental health crisis in this country. But people suffering from mental illness are not the big problem when it comes to mass acts of violence. Here's a little fact for you. Most people who commit these atrocious acts do not suffer from a diagnosable mental illness. That's just not the case. If you look throughout the world, I'm not just talking about America, at people creating these incidents and committing mass acts of violence, murder, etc., they're doing it more so for race, for religion, for nationality, for money, for land, than they are because of a mental illness. People with mental illnesses seldomly ever harm anyone. When you look at people with mental illnesses, the vast majority of them never harm anyone. And the few that do harm people, well, the vast majority of them only harm themselves. It's a tiny little sliver of the population of people that have mental illnesses that commit these violent acts. We should not demonize everyone with a mental illness just because of this tiny little fraction of their population. That's a trap we too often fall into, and we need to stop doing it with people with mental illnesses. Because when we demonize mental illnesses, not only do we harm the people that have them, make them feel worse about themselves, but we make people that may have an illness or may have an issue, a mental health issue, that they could easily address from seeking treatment because they don't want to be labeled as mentally ill. Most people that have an issue, a mental health issue, do not have any type of long-term illness. It's transitory. They're depressed because of something that has happened to them. They've lost a loved one, they've lost a relationship, etc. They're angry, they've lost their job, etc. They're frustrated, they feel excluded, they're lonely. Things like that. Temporary situations that could easily be remedied if people were willing to try. So labeling people with mental illnesses as some sort of extra risk to society, I don't think that's fair. Now, like I say, there are extreme cases. There are some people that they are one dose of their medication away from killing the mailman because they think he's an alien. And those people should have a system in place to separate them from society. But like I said, they're such a tiny little sliver. More people are liable to go out and commit an act of mass murder because they just broke up with their girlfriend and their life seems like it's over, or they lost their job and they know they're never going to get another one. People are far more likely to do it because of that, something temporary, than they are a long-term mental illness, something that they've dealt with their entire life or their adult life, whatever. It's a misconception a lot of people seem to have. And like I say, it doesn't help. And when we start talking about things like red flag laws, which is what politicians love to start doing once we start acting like mental illness is the problem, that is also a step in the wrong direction, because that is, once again, demonizing mental illness. That is saying, hey, if you can point to someone and you can tell us you think they have an issue, well, then we'll slap this big red label on them, red flag on them, and say, these people are dangerous, and we will deal with that by stepping in and removing their rights without due process. Yeah, that's going to make someone who has an issue feel better. That's going to actually help their problem. They're sitting at home, they're depressed, they're angry, they're frustrated, etc. And the police show up at their door and say, guess what? You're no longer a whole person as far as we're concerned. You're dangerous. We're taking your rights away. That's not going to push people to commit violent acts. Nah, of course not. When someone is labeled a risk First off, families need to start being more involved. And instead of labeling people risks or red flags when they have issues, how about we say, hey, this person is in need of some compassion. Maybe this person needs some outreach. Not removing their rights. You'd be far better, I think, if you had 50 people, and this is coming from a professional mental health aspect here, perspective here. If you took 50 people that had access to firearms that were in a bad state at this given time, if you went to all 50 of them and told them, guess what, you're dangerous, society doesn't want you, we're taking your rights away, I think you would cause more violence than you stopped. If you went to those 50 people and said, hey, we know you're having a rough time right now and things look bad, they're not as bad as you think they are. Tomorrow's a little brighter, and the day after that'll be a little brighter. And we help them find resources or just human companionship and comfort, we'd stop a whole lot more negative acts, suicide, violence, etc. So we need to stop demonizing. We need to start being Americans again and say everyone's an American. We need to stop festering, allowing hate to fester in our society because of the color of someone's skin or anything. And we don't need to add one more thing we hate people for to the list, mental illness, to look at those people with mental illness. We don't need to create one more, isolated segment. We've tended to do that too much through history. And like I said, the vast majority of people who commit violence are not mentally ill. I just reject that statement. People are capable of atrocious acts. They don't require mental illness to do that. Some people are just disgusting. That's the reality of life. The vast majority of us are not. And it's up to the vast majority of us that are not to recognize people that are on the brink of doing something bad and try to pull them back towards the good side, not shove them to the bad side or reject them or cast them out like red flag laws do, etc. And in this rambling video here, that's the only point I'm trying to make. We need to stop creating so many divisions. We need to start bringing people together again as one country, Americans, and stop making all these judgments about people because of their, like I said, race, nationality, sexuality, or whether they suffer from a mental illness or not. A mental illness should be no more shameful than having a hangnail. Because in reality, someone having a mental illness statistically is no more dangerous to somebody else than someone who does have a hangnail. And we need to start treating it like that. Stop treating them like they're broken people, because the vast majority of them are not. I would say no greater percentage of people with mental illnesses are actually dangerous, broken people than just people who have been indoctrinated into hate and violence and things like that. If you are raised to hate another race, another nationality, etc., that's not a mental illness. That's conditioning. Conditioning is responsible for far more violence than illness. So that's my message. Let's stop dividing into different groups. Let's stop labeling other groups as dangerous. Let's stop demonizing people, especially when it comes to mental illness. Let's create a better mental health system in this country so people that do face temporary situations have resources. But until then, let's stop demonizing people that have mental illnesses, because the only thing you're doing is hurting them and stopping other people that could come forward and receive help from doing it.
Oops.
Go ahead.
It's a lady at 46 South Road. 46 South Road.
Station 1 call, retone that police. 10-4. Captain 4 to go to that location also. 1 versus 1-9, is that correct?